Since the Rodecaster Pro's release in 2018, there have been a few competitors to try and take the title of Best All-in-One Podcast Streaming Audio Studio. The Tascam Mixcast 4 is the most recent and arguably the most capable, so let's see if the Tascam is up to the task at hand. And before you get mixed up about the Mixcast, I've got a few points that I want to clarify. First being that Sweetwater did send this to me so that I could do a review, and I'm super appreciative of that. Sweetwater has supported my channel a few times throughout the years, and it means a lot to me because I've been a customer there since I was in high school, so that is super cool. Thank you, Sweetwater. And two, I wasn't actually planning on doing a review of the Mixcast because originally I wasn't that interested in it. I will admit I am 100% biased towards the Rodecaster Pro. You probably know that at this point. What I saw when the Tascam came out was this thing that seemed kind of like the Rodecaster 3 years later for the same price. But I've gotten so many questions about this on literally a daily basis that I thought it was probably worth a look. And so I wanted to acknowledge right off the bat that I do have a bias towards the Rodecaster Pro. And what I'm going to try to do as best as I possibly can for this review is set that aside and look at the Tascam Mixcast 4 as objectively as possible. And I can tell you, just to spoil a few things, this is really great. This is definitely an awesome tool that I don't think you would regret purchasing, even if you had to pay the tax man for the Tascam. So let's get started by actually switching our audio over to the Tascam. You're currently listening to the Sennheiser MKH50 running directly into my Sony FX3. And now I've connected my headphones to the 3.5mm headphone jack on the front of the Tascam, which is also a TRRS jack. So that means you can connect 3.5mm microphones to the front of this, or headphones with a microphone thingy on them. That's pretty cool. And then we'll start with a condenser mic. This is the Earthworks ICON. It is wearing the Ethos windscreen, but it is the ICON microphone. So again, this is the Sennheiser MKH50, and now this is the Earthworks ICON running into the Tascam Mixcast 4. There's no effects and no processing put on this microphone at all. This is just the driest sound possible. So let's run through some of the basics of design and functionality of the Mixcast 4. It has basically all the exact same channels and inputs as the Rodecaster Pro. So we've got 4 XLR channels, but they are XLR combo jacks. So that means you can connect an XLR cable or a 1/4-inch cable to them, which is awesome. I kind of wish everything that had an XLR input was a combo jack, although I will say this does not have any settings for instruments, and typically 1/4-inch jacks are used for instruments because they are instrumental in taking advantage of that format. And what I mean by that is even though you can connect something with a 1/4-inch jack, you can't get a line level input. You can only do a mic level input, so it's just something to kind of be aware of there. But you do have 4 XLR channels, you have a USB channel, you have a smartphone channel, you have a Bluetooth channel, and of course you have the SoundPad channel. So basically exactly the same as the Rodecaster Pro. And then you do have 8 customizable sound pads, just like the Rodecaster Pro, and you can cycle between 9 different banks of sound. So you have a lot of options if you want to do sound pads or effects, because the Tascam will also let you map some of the built-in effects to the sound pads, which is super cool. And on the rear of the device, that's where you have your 4 XLR combo jacks. You also have a 3.5mm TRRS input for a smartphone and right and left 1/4-inch line inputs. And then there's a little switch that will let you select which one you want to use. So that smartphone channel has a little more versatility than you might expect. You also have something that I think is really cool, and that is a 3.5mm line output. So if you want to just connect this to a small speaker or even a second recorder, for added redundancy and backup, you can do that pretty easily. You've got right and left 1/4-inch monitor outputs, and then you have your 4 1/4-inch headphone outputs as well. This does take a full-size SD card, and there's a covered SD card slot right there. There's a USB-C connector to connect it to your computer and use it as an interface or transfer files. I should also mention too that the channel colors and the headphone colors are matched. So, channel 2 is purple down here, channel 2 is purple up here. That's really cool, but as of now, there's no way to customize those colors or switch them around. You're just sort of stuck with the order and the way that they're being used. The faders themselves actually feel really nice. The Rodecaster Pro, one of my few criticisms of it is that the faders don't always feel the best. The faders themselves are metal, but the way they slide has always been a little rough to me. The only downside I can see is that there's no protective element in here. On the Rodecaster and a lot of other mixers, there's sort of like these plastic membranes that come together, and then the fader slides between those, and that keeps dust and dirt from getting inside the mixer. The Tascam doesn't have that, so you can actually, if you look directly in here, you can see inside the Tascam
And the dangerous part to that is it means dust and dirt and all that stuff can get in there, and that can, down the line, potentially cause some like scratchy, funky audio. Basically what that means is it's probably a good idea to put some sort of cover over this when you're not using it to protect it from that. Now each track does also have a mute and a solo button, so you can press mute, you can press solo, you can do it basically the same functionality as the Rodecaster. There is this really interesting button up here that says talk back. And what that does is it turns this into a spoiled 2-year-old child that will talk back to you anytime you tell it to do anything. What it actually does is if you press and hold talk back, it will take the audio from channel 1 and send it just to the headphones. So if you're doing a show and your director or your main person is on channel 1, they can do talk back and talk to people who have headphones on, but the output won't pick up that audio. So it's kind of a nice way to enable communication between multiple people using the Mixcast 4 at once without it affecting the output or the recording. Up here at the top, you do have your monitor output volume, and then you also have volume knobs for each of the 4 headphone inputs. And of course, you've got a big, giant, full-color touchscreen here. This touchscreen works great. It's just as responsive as a smartphone, which is really cool because there are a few things that require you to interact with it in a more in-depth way, and it's nice that it's responsive. So here, actually, I'm going to switch back to the Sennheiser right now
to show you that if I stop recording, which by the way, there are separate record, pause, stop, and mark buttons. And that is something I like better than the Rodecaster because the Rodecaster, the one button does all of these functions, and I have made a few mistakes. So for example, there have been times where I'm recording on the Rodecaster and I want to do record, pause. To do that, you just hold the record button down for a few seconds until it turns orange, and then your recording is paused until you tap it again, and then it will pick up where you left off. But if you accidentally release the recording button a little too early before it goes into pause mode, you'll just end your recording. It's kind of nice having, this is record pause, so I can, if I press it, it will record. If I hold it down, it will record pause. If I want to stop recording, there's a stop button with physical like obstacles around it so you can't accidentally hit it, and that's what will stop it. And then if I press the stop button, the Tascam will actually confirm that I want to stop recording. And this is actually what I wanted to show you is when you're done recording, this little screen pops up that lets you rename a file. So for example, what I can do here is say Tascam audio _1. So now I know when I'm editing this video, that file will be the first round of audio. The biggest criticism I have about the display right here is you might notice the faders themselves and the channels themselves have numbers on them. So you can tell kind of where your level is, where your unity mark is. The screen here doesn't have that. And unlike the Rodecaster, you can't turn it on. On the Rodecaster, the 4 XLR channels do have a button above them that as soon as you press that, it brings you into the settings for that channel. I really like that because it makes it super easy to adjust settings on a specific channel. You can just press that one button and then dive into those settings. This is a little more convoluted. You have to press the little hamburger menu icon in the corner, and then you have this icon here that has microphone. It's basically all the channels. If you tap that, then you can go into the channel you want to modify. From there, you can skip between different channels. You can adjust your levels. You can turn on and off phantom power. You can even tell the Mixcast if you're using a dynamic microphone, if it's in the front through that TRRS port, or if it's in the rear. You can play with some of the effects, which we'll get into later. And you can change some of the voice settings too. And basically every channel kind of has those same settings. USB has some more custom settings for using USB audio, especially if you're going to be playing music through USB. You can go in here and enhance it for speech or music, or just leave it off. You can go into the smartphone channel and kind of do the same thing if you want to enhance how you're going to be using your smartphone. Or Bluetooth, this is where you can pair and then adjust some of your Bluetooth settings if you do want to connect a Bluetooth device. You don't need anything external like you do with the Zoom P8. All of the Bluetooth connectivity is built right into the Mixcast 4, just like the Rodecaster Pro. Now you have a few other options in the menu. You have the Playback menu where you can go through and see your audio. You can then go through and kind of dial in and add some markers. So you do have some like very basic built-in editing functionality, but that is really, really cool. You can change the names and everything and delete individual files from here as well. You can then also adjust the sound pads here. If there's a blank pad, this is where you can go into recording, and I could record something right now to load into a sound pad, or you can then sort of change some of the other settings if you want the pad to be an effect instead of a sound thing, if you want it to bleep something out so you can use it as like a censored button if you need to, or anything like that. And then you do have some hardware settings for the Mixcast 4. You can change the brightness of the display, and it also adjusts the brightness of the buttons. Right now, this is as bright as it will go, and honestly, the display is a little bit dim for me. If I'm right over it, it's a little brighter, but if I'm kind of back here where I would normally be, it's a little dimmer, so I do wish the display were a little bit brighter. Then if we go into audio hardware settings, this is where we can turn on USB mix minus. If you're using this as a sound source for anything like Zoom or where you're talking to someone and audio from your computer is coming into it, but you don't want to send that audio back out to create an echo, I did a whole video about USB mix minus. It's very important. This is also where you can turn on the auto mixer feature where the Mixcast will then sort of try to level everything out on its own. I'm not a huge fan of automatic things like that, but that's just because I'm a control freak. You can do feedback prevention. It's almost like noise cancellation if you have a monitor playing and it will try not to pick it up on the microphone and create feedback. Again, the reason I don't like using these kinds of things is because I feel like they can sometimes have a negative effect on the overall quality of your audio, and I would rather work to just do something like wear headphones or adjust my audio so it sounds as good as possible while being recorded, not something that I need to rely on a machine to figure out automatically because, again, trust issues and control freak. Hardware settings where you can also go into multi-track recording, so you can record to the SD card via multi-track. You can also record directly to your desktop application if you want to. And you can also turn on the effects bypass. So that means your main stereo file will have any effects and mixing and EQ that you add in, but it means that the raw multi-track files will just be the raw dry audio that you can then EQ later if you want. Here's something that is amazing that I really love and I wish every mixer had that. There's a USB delay. So if you're using this for streaming and you notice that your audio and your video is out of sync, you can add a delay from 0 milliseconds all the way up to 2000 milliseconds, and that will bring your audio and your video in sync together. Super helpful in applications like Zoom, where even when you add in your software settings, it still sometimes goes out of sync. You can then adjust that right here. And then, of course, we have just sort of our basic settings. That's where you can adjust the date and the time. You can reset everything. You can see the firmware version that you're using. Now we've switched back to the Tascam since we've gone through all the menus. Let's play around with some of the effects so you can see how some of the processing works. Right now, and the whole time I've been recording through the Mixcast, I haven't had any effects on my microphone. But if I go to channel 4, I am using that condenser microphone. And I do have my gain set now to 24, and pretty much I'm just trying to peak up in these little gates right here. I could probably even raise it up a little bit if I needed to. This level has nothing to do with your actual volume level on any of these kinds of mixers. This is the actual input coming from the microphone, how loud you want that to be, and then you can use your fader to actually adjust that level into the mix and the output. So here's where you can select if you're using a condenser or a dynamic microphone. And really what that means is phantom power on or off. If you're using a condenser microphone, it will turn phantom power on, and you can tell phantom power is on because there will be a little red dot next to that channel in the home screen right here. If you're using a mic booster with a dynamic mic, you might need to turn on the condenser setting to get phantom power enabled so that you can use this with your dynamic mic. And then you have these two options here for all of the XLR channels, voice setting and effect setting. Voice setting will allow you to enable a little bit of processing. So for example, there's a de-esser and a noise suppressor. If I turn on the de-esser, wow, it's really aggressive. It's an aggressive de-esser. That sounds terrible. Fortunately, I can go into this little settings option and I can then adjust this to maybe be less aggressive. You don't have the total granular control that you have in something like the Rodecaster Pro. With its built-in effects, you can really kind of dial in a lot more. But you do have a noise suppressor as well. And basically what this means is when I'm not talking, it's going to try and just make the channel as silent as possible. So if I stop talking right now, you can like almost aggressively hear this noise gate opening and closing. So much so, though, that if I start talking a little less loudly, so if you're somebody who speaks with a soft voice, it might start cutting in and out on you. So that means here we can adjust how we want this low cut filter and this noise gate to interact with each other. We can turn the low cut filter higher or lower, and then we can adjust the aggression of the noise gate. Some settings will let you scroll over and adjust more things here. So we can also do that here with our noise suppressor setting. We can change the threshold. We can change the attack and make it maybe a little less. There we go. We can make it a little more natural. I think this sounds a little bit better than it did right away. It's not cutting me off at all when I'm talking, but as soon as I stop talking, then it makes things silent. So this is actually not bad. It still sounds a little artificial to me, but you could potentially dial it in. If you're in a less than ideal environment or a not well-treated room, this could be a lifesaver for you. And then we do have our effects. We have several effects here, including reverb, and I can decide how much, whoa, there's so much reverb. It's a fun feature, and I like that you have so much granular control over it. I am going to turn reverb off because
Yikes. Now we do also have a voice changer, so I'm going to turn that on.
And now this will adjust the pitch of my voice. Wow. So
I can go all the way down here, and I can go
all the way over here. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Mike.
Mike who?
Mic check 1, 2. Oops.
Now I mentioned a little bit ago that you can map effects to these sound pads. So what does that mean?
What is the effect of mapping an effect to the sound pad?
Well, basically that right there. Right now on this button right here, I have the pitch shifting effect set to go really high, and if I hold that
Down, then it raises my voice and changes the pitch.
I think that's really fun, and it gives you a lot of really cool creative
Options. We're back to the voice.
Changer, so whatever I leave that to is what it's going to be when I use that effect pad.
Yeah, so if I go here, now I sound normal, and
If I push that, then I sound like Isaac Hayes. Hello, children.
And I should say, too, that this whole thing is just incredibly well built. The faceplate is all metal, which is really nice, and it feels very heavy duty. Its physical size is basically identical to the Rodecaster Pro, but it does sit a little bit lower on your desk because it's just not at quite as high of an angle. Now, when it comes to the gain level of the Tascam, I'm finding some conflicting information. I have an SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone connected, and let's switch over to that. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, I'm on the Shure SM7B. And you better believe that this is a dynamic microphone. And if I go into the settings for channel 1, you'll see that my meter over here is set to 43. And this is where I'm getting confused. So at 43, I'm actually getting a pretty decent level. And my channel's fader is only a little bit above halfway. I can even bump this up louder than I would really want it. So it seems like the built-in gain on the Mixcast is more than enough to power the SM7B, although I will say at this level, if I stop talking, you can hear quite a bit of hiss and noise, so it's not necessarily super clean gain. But where it gets more confusing is this right here on all the channels goes to 50, so I can go from 0 to 50, which made me think, okay, there's 50 decibels of gain. The Rodecaster Pro has 55, the Zoom PodTrack P8 has 76. But then looking through the manual, the specifications, and Tascam's own website, I also see 66 decibels as a number that's being put out and 76 decibels. So I actually don't know what the official gain output is. I will say that when I crank the SM7B up as loud as it will go, this feels like it's at least 66 decibels of gain. Let's try using a mic booster to see if that's a little bit quieter. So this is the FET head, which one of the reasons I really like this is because you can just connect it directly to your input. You don't have to run an extension cable. We'll connect this cable directly to that. And now we'll go into these mic settings. We'll need to change it to condenser so that way it enables phantom power, even though I'm not actually using a condenser microphone. So that was kind of a weird thing that happened. It really did not like the FET head, at least did not like it being connected directly to the unit. So I'm using the Clark Technic CT1, which is fine because this is a significantly less expensive booster. It's only usually like $30 or $40. And now I feel like there's a lot less hiss in the SM7B. So this is the SM7B's noise level with the Clark Technic. Let's try connecting the FET head in line and see what that sounds like. This is now the FET head not connected directly to the Tascam, but connected to an extension cable, and now it sounds amazing. So it did not sound great when I connected it to it, but here's the FET head noise level. And just so you don't think I'm crazy, this is what it sounds like when I connect the FET head directly to the Mixcast 4. It sounds awful. I don't know if it's because there's metal touching metal, but as soon as I run it through a little extension cable so that way it's not directly into the Mixcast, then the FET head is incredibly clean, and I think this sounds terrific. And now we're back to the SM7B without a mic booster, and it's sort of normal gain level in the Tascam, which to me is a little bit noisy. I think it definitely sounds better with the FET head, even though there's technically enough gain in here to run the SM7B. So it's not just about having the gain, it's about having clean gain. And then you gain clean audio. Another thing that I really like about the Mixcast 4 is that it does have really nice headphone preamps. My biggest complaint about the Rodecaster over the years has been that the headphone preamps are a bit noisy. It's usually good news because it means your finished recording or actual output is going to be higher quality than what you're hearing in your headphones, but it's always best when those are accurate. the Mixcast 4 has really good headphone preamps that sound nice and clear. It sounds exactly like what's coming out of the recorder. Speaking of things coming out of the recorder, let's take a look at the desktop app. The Tascam Podcast Editor is a free download from Tascam's website, and when you have the Mixcast 4 connected to it, it does show up as a source, and everything gets mapped out exactly as it is seen on here. So we have, you can see microphone 1, 2, 3, and 4, the USB, smartphone, Bluetooth channel, and sound pads. We can also add in additional audio sources if you want, so it doesn't only work with the Tascam Mixcast 4. And we also have some basic controls here up at the top for our playback. We can go in and adjust the sound pads. We can save sounds to the computer from the pads, to the pads from the computer. We can adjust all that stuff there. We can change the colors, customize things pretty easily through here. We also have some basic processing that we can do. We can create a configuration and save it or load it. So very similar to the Rode Companion app in that regard. And then the audio interface section is going to let us configure how we want to use this as an interface. So what's our input, what's our output going to be? And not just that, but what are the active input channels? So if I want to use this as an interface, but I only want to use channel 1 because I'm running other stuff through some of the other channels and I don't want other people to hear those, I can just deselect those channels right there. That's pretty cool. Haven't seen that on other applications. We can also adjust if we want to do a 48,000 hertz sample rate. So great if you want to use this as a video production tool. And we can also adjust the buffer size. It's important to note that of the 4 podcast recording studios that I've reviewed, the Rodecaster, the Zoom P8, the Zoom P4, and the Tascam Mixcast 4, only the Rodecaster and the Tascam record at 48,000 hertz. So that means they're more ideally suited not just for audio, but also for video use. And this application is actually pretty fun because I'm recording directly on the Mixcast 4 right here, but I can also press record, and now I can start recording here as well. And you can see channel 4 is where I'm talking, and that's where the audio is. So what I could also do then, if I wanted to play around with multi-track a little bit, is I can disable all of these other channels and only use the channel that I want, so I don't have to record everything all at once. And now I'm pressing record, and only channel 4 is recording. What's really fun is we can add in some effects in here. So this is where you can load plugins, and there are even built-in ones, so we can add in noise gates and equalizers, reverb, delay, chorus, phaser. So there's actually more effects built into the application than there are in the unit itself. But if I wanted to add something here, you just add it to one of the slots, and now I've got delay, and then I can go in and sort of adjust some of those settings right there. So we can turn our effects on or off, we can delete them. And when we're all done, you can click the little hamburger menu and select export, and then you can choose your sample rate, you can choose your bit depth, you can have loudness normalization on or off. You can then also choose if you want to do WAV, MP3, or MP4. So if you wanted to do a really simple video podcast, for example, you could just add a picture right here, and then it will create a video file where it has that image showing over the audio as it plays back. And beyond the desktop application, Tascam does have a mobile application for the podcast editor that will work on phones and tablets. So I have it on my iPhone XR right here. And this actually looks pretty similar to what we see on the desktop version. I can actually just start recording right here using my phone's built-in microphone. But I could also connect an external microphone, or if you're using like a USB-C tablet or you have an adapter or a USB-C phone, you could connect the Mixcast 4 directly to here and then record to a mobile device. So if you want to have a mobile on-the-go setup, especially if you want some redundancy and some backups, you can bring a tablet or a phone, and then that can be your podcast setup, and you don't need to worry about bringing a computer along as well. Then we kind of have basically the exact same features. I can even go in here and play around with sound pads and stuff like that. So even if you don't have the Mixcast 4, getting this application might be something fun to try out on your phone or your tablet if you've been looking for software or you want to create and edit stuff and you don't know where to get started. It's free and it's got some pretty cool features. So now, as I promised at the beginning of the video, let's talk about the ways that the Tascam beats out the Rodecaster Pro and the ways that the Rodecaster Pro still has advantages over the Tascam, and then you can make your decision based on that. So one of them just comes down to design. These are similar looking, but also very different looking devices. If you just like the way that this looks, or you think it's going to fit better on your workspace, that could be an advantage. Same goes with the Rodecaster Pro. If you like the interface on one or the other, that's all personal preference. There are a few physical advantages to the Tascam, including a full-size SD card slot. Those are just always easier to work with, full-size SD. The smartphone channel input, being able to do 2 1/4-inch inputs or a 3.5 millimeter is pretty nifty. Having a TRRS input on the front where you could connect a microphone. The 3.5 millimeter line output on the back is also really helpful. Especially for me, there were so many times where I was running like Zoom classes and things in the past using the Rodecaster that I was trying to find easy ways of connecting just a really tiny speaker so that I could hear things without having to wear headphones all day, but without the speaker being so big and loud that it was going to interfere with the microphone and the audio. Another advantage of the Mixcast is the greater options for effects and things like that. Having the reverb, having the pitch shift, being able to map those to the buttons so that the buttons trigger the effects, and having that built-in delay for audio syncing, I think is huge. It's just one of those things that will make a lot of people's lives a lot easier. But of course, there are ways that the Rodecaster Pro does beat out the Tascam. One of them, if you want to talk about power, the Rodecaster doesn't have a native USB power function, but you can buy Rode's USB adapter, which means you can then run this off of a USB power bank. I've done that in several videos, and it's pretty fun. The Rodecaster Pro, generally speaking, does give you more granular control over EQ and effects. It doesn't have as much goofy stuff like pitch shifting and reverb, but it has, helpful de-essers and the aural exciter and the big bottom booster and all that stuff, and you have a lot of very granular control over that if you want to have it. It's much, much easier to access your channel settings on the Rodecaster Pro because each of the 4 XLR channels has a physical button that you can press and then dive right into those settings. One of my negative points when reviewing the Zoom P8 and the P4 are Zoom's lack of firmware updates. They're just really not known for providing firmware updates that go beyond minor bug fixes and things, not adding in new features. Tascam, especially because it seems like they really want this product to be competitive, I think there's a greater likelihood in feature-rich firmware updates coming out in the future. But since the Rodecaster was released in 2018 to now, Rode has a really excellent track record of firmware updates, adding new functionality. And I can tell you, having used this from the time it was released to now, this is almost a different device in a lot of ways based on the firmware updates that have been released. And while the Rodecaster Pro doesn't have combo XLR jacks in the back, it just has regular XLR jacks. They are locking XLR jacks, so you have a little metal release to let your cable out. The Mixcast doesn't have that, which just means theoretically, you could accidentally pull a cable out while recording. The Rodecaster also does let you put numbers and audio levels on your broadcast meter so you can see where things are leveling out to and what you're mixing at. And to me, something that counts as an advantage that might or might not count to you is that the Rodecaster is the original. That was my negative feeling about the Mixcast, was it showed up 3 years later and was kind of the same thing. And I sort of felt like, well, you need to either be bringing a lot of new stuff to the table or you need to be doing it at a much lower price. But the Tascam retails for the same $600 price tag as the Rodecaster Pro. And another thing that may not be a direct feature of the unit, but something that I do like is the Rodecaster Pro is designed and manufactured in Australia. The Tascam was designed in Japan and made in China. Without going into the political side of manufacturing and stuff, the reason that I like Rode handling everything themselves, in addition to having well-treated employees and high-quality environments, is that they do have the option for the people who design and come up with ideas for these products to literally walk over and see them being manufactured. And I feel like that helps to create really high-quality products in the end. But as I said at the start of this video, the Tascam Mixcast 4, the Rodecaster Pro, they're both excellent and they do really great things, and they have some super killer features that will make your life a lot easier if you do a lot of podcasting or streaming and audio mixing and production. And I totally understand how it can sort of be a tough decision since these are kind of equal in a lot of ways. But what I will say is that since the Rodecaster was released in 2018 and Tascam took until 2021 to release something that was as good as the Rodecaster Pro, what I'm really excited about is to see what might be on Rode's roadmap in the future. And speaking of things to be excited about, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through YouTube channel memberships and Patreon. You are the true Rodecaster pros. And if you want to know more about the world of audio podcast streaming recorders, check out my review of the Zoom PodTrack P8 and the Zoom PodTrack P4 before you go.